with a quick video and inspiration that came on me today. It had been a while since I was getting back to verbal videos. I had been doing more musical videos lately, but it's similar to something that I said in some previous videos where the exercising of enunciating our thoughts is very helpful and enlightening both to ourselves and others, and we become aware of insights that we may have had on a deeper levels of our awareness, but they start to surface the more that we enunciate and do things with like content, and where not only enunciating our thoughts, but doing so in a space where we can confirm that our ideas are landing with other people and with an audience in some type of reciprocity or value. That's really where our best comes out. I would almost, if anyone's struggling with anything in life, if you can find a respectful a way to bring value and some of your originality, that might be as helpful and therapeutic as any dealing with any professional. And it's also more vibrant and alive because you're creating value and you're potentially extending and receiving value rather than interning it, which means like putting something into earth for burial onto the couch or the personal space of a professional or therapist who may or may not have your best interest and is also creating a chart about you, and that can be to your detriment, personally, financially, chemically, so on and so forth. But speaking of chemically, this video is actually a little bit of insight into sobriety that I wanted to share, which is that I highly encourage sobriety for any person, especially artists. I once had an opportunity to speak with a professor of mine while I was attending Berklee College of Music. So I was attending remotely from several states, half the country away. But in the springtime, there would be a conference where we could convene on campus, and I would get to meet some of the other students and staff. And I actually got to have breakfast with one of my professors who I was engaging with in a class, in a small intimate class in the first place, but then being able to meet them in person. And there I actually asked them one question, which was how they thought about the employment of substances for artists, because it's been long known that different artists have engaged with substances and been reputed to engage creativity through substances. But she pointed out that it's kind of a little bit of a cheap trick and it burns out quickly, because for whatever advantage you get employing substance, that it's doing more damage, and you're more so squandering your potential. The orator Osho, in one of his discourses, he put forward that when you take a substance, like say you were to take a psychedelic substance, on the one hand it breaks off some of the filters that your mind has, so you experience many things within yourself and without yourself, such as colors and visual perception, much more vivid than you would in your normal sober waking consciousness. However, when it's doing this, you're also you're becoming more, in a certain way, you're becoming more spoiled. So you're becoming, by you tasting some of that deeper perception, when you inevitably come back to sobriety, on the one hand, having seen that, you're somewhat jaded now because you understand the distinction of what's actually possible, but what your normal state is. However, you had bypassed that chemically, but then you're also somewhat dulled by that. So your regular consciousness becomes actually more dull than it had been before, and so it takes a greater effort to reach that same place, and it's also difficult. And then at a certain point, you can't reach that greater state, or your normal state is also more dull. So in a sense, you're dulling your senses by engaging in substances. However, if you were to somehow, there's a content creator called Morris Brooklyn, and he has a content available that explains that there are certain things called entheogens, which are different chemical or different plant and animal substances that can actually heighten or lower our normal senses or states of consciousness that are actually a part of nature, and that correspond with our bodies, which are also a part of nature. So there are a lot of kind of deadly politics and financial interests that surround the monopolization and the dispensing of different plant and chemical substances, from what would be called medicine, food, but then also to these entheogens, which are not different, any of those, and that are not that some of them can be actual bounties and benefits from nature. But I can't speak on that level. But I did want to put that out there, that there is such a thing as entheogens, which what are called substances are also entheogens, and that they are not entirely they're not benign or detriments in themselves. They're just simply very potent and powerful, and they require care to be administered and handled. I gotta do something right now, but all I meant to say is that there can be a space for entheogens in creativity and in health. However, by living a life of sobriety, we can engage with them in an appropriate setting more effectively, like such as a ceremony with certain cultures that employ entheogens. And it's more advantageous and effective when we live an overall baseline of sobriety. But what I just basically wanted to say with sobriety is that if you consider alcohol, which might be the most accessible and common form of substance, we think of like the higher planes of thought and the higher experiences that sometimes we taste with like things like alcohol. But what I want to say is that what alcohol might do is that all things exist on a spectrum, so that the opposite ends of a spectrum overlap. So rather than going up to the higher planes of consciousness, perhaps the alcohol makes us fall down lower, and then we actually arrive at that higher plane of consciousness by falling down lower. But it doesn't stop there, and then we keep going once again lower, so we come even like a redoubled lower level, having tasted a little bit of the higher planes of consciousness with the alcohol. But if we had been sober in the first place, I think that if you actually engage with sobriety long enough, you can arrive at some of those higher states of consciousness with sobriety, and maybe an influence such as music, where music alters consciousness in a unique way, similar to what a mantra would do. That's a property and dimension in itself that could take a voluminous video or discourse to elaborate upon. It's just, but simply, we can reach higher planes of consciousness through sobriety, and then maybe other influences that are more constructive and healthy, such as music or many different things. You can take that as you will, but I just want to put out the value of sobriety and being able to reach some of these states of consciousness that other substances, such as like maybe alcohol or different entheogens, could bring us to. But doing so with propriety and being in a more well-suited and advantageous position to truly taste and experience what those higher planes of consciousness are through sobriety, as it were. And so the last thing I want to say is that there's a YouTuber who has some very hardcore subject matter that deals with like hip hop and lifestyles and factors around some like rock and roll lifestyles, but as it pertains to hip hop in the streets. But one thing he's famous for saying is he has this very thick accent from the Carolinas that's really beautiful and eloquent in his way. And he'll say things like, "Who told you to reward yourself? Who told you to reward yourself?" I challenge anyone who struggles with alcohol or anything like that, look yourself in the mirror and say 5 times in a row, "Who told you to reward yourself?" Say that 5 times, and you might have discipline and approach yourself differently and stop rewarding yourself over things like alcohol that are doing you damage, and really go through the discipline to taste the higher states the strong way. That's all I'm saying with this video. So respect to him for saying that, and respect to anyone who is engaged, who is interested in becoming sober. And even if you deal with alcohol, no judgment. We've all been there, and there's certain things to be enjoyed with that, but there's also another way, and that's what I'm coming with. Peace.